Good morning, I'm Jim Roselle.
And I'm Russ Dietrich.
And welcome to the Times of Your Life. Good morning, Russ Dietrich.
Good morning to you, Jim Roselle.
It's another beautiful day in our town.
Oh, it sure is, isn't it?
We're going to be in the 80s
wow.
in the near future here. Russ, we have a very special guest this morning, the author of a book about what life is like when you suddenly find your marriage has fallen apart.
Wow.
And
what an experience.
The book has a unique title. It's called The Dance Card. It's written, authored by Anne Reichardt, who was married for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And just suddenly one day, her husband said, I don't love you any longer.
Oh, dear.
And this is it. And the story is she decided to write a book to give advice to those that encounter the same situation. So we're happy to have her on this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you gentlemen this morning?
We're fine. And where are you calling from?
I am calling from Madison, Wisconsin.
How's that? The Badger State.
The
Badger State.
Well, we follow Wisconsin football and Wisconsin basketball. They had quite a season. Yeah.
They certainly did.
Yeah.
Love it. Love the Badgers.
Well, and let me just, for the sake of letting the audience realize how you started your book, it's just written that you had 30 years of marriage, and you suddenly heard from your husband that he was no longer in love with you. And was it that? I mean, was that were you aware at any time that that was a possibility?
No, not exaggerating at all. That's exactly what happened to me, and I can't speak for other people that have been in the same situation, but I was totally, it was an unexpected event. I hadn't a clue, and I think that's what made it really difficult because it didn't give me an opportunity to really muddle through, well, what went wrong and can we fix this? Because he'd already left he was out the marital door, even without giving me an opportunity, or the two of us an opportunity, to really seek any kind of marriage counseling.
Well, I'm trying to picture you, that moment that you had, that encounter. Did he explain in more detail why?
No, he really didn't. I can, if you want to have a visual, I was lying on my bed, and he just came through the bedroom door and announced, just as you said, Anne, I don't love you anymore. I have no romantic feelings for you, which says a lot right there once I sort of analyzed it. And I really would like a divorce. It's just matter of fact. And I was in shock, or actually I was in denial, more so than shock, because I didn't believe it at that moment in time. And obviously as the days proceeded, because he just left, he didn't really take anything at that time. He in his mind had left months, if not years before, and it just took him that length of time to get up enough courage to make the move. The move. And certainly after I discovered that this was a reality, I went through the grieving process, and that's huge.
Very weak.
Did he? This may be a silly question, Ann, but did he leave within 24 hours?
Yes, he did. He left right away. And as I don't really point that out in my book, because really that's not my message. My message is how I move forward after a life-changing event and the challenges that went along with that. But yeah, obviously down the road, as his psychological state became a little less frenetic, he would come back and we'd discuss things. But I really had no choice in the matter. The choice was not something that I had. It was already given to me because he'd made the decision, and that's what he needed to do. And so he left, and I eventually packed up his things and sent them on their way. And I had to deal with whatever was left, within that fabric of my tattered fabric of my family.
Well, it was 30 years.
Yes.
And as you said, you had the thought it was forever.
Definitely. I'm 64 years old now, and Jim, coming from that era, that when you're married, we have memories and history and children together, and all of those memories together are lost. It's like they'd never meant anything anymore. And so, what do? Do you start anew? I didn't know. I really didn't know. I was clueless at that point in time.
Well, obviously, your friends came to your side and did what they possibly could do to console you or give you some encouragement, great support.
Yes, and that's so important, and this is another curiosity about that. I have a lot of friends, and the real true friends that really stuck by my side are still there today, and I come from a very large family. I have 9 siblings, and my mother was alive at the time, so she was a huge support. But the other curious thing about all of a sudden being a single woman in midlife and having been a couple for so many years, which is really a message I want to put forth to a lot of people, is that all of a sudden you are not part of that group anymore. You are left out. And it changes your whole perspective on who you are, because you are, at one point, for so many years I was identified along with that person that I'd been with for so many years, and now as I put it in my book, I was a leper in my old life. Really was.
And that's is Russ Dietrich, Ann.
Yes.
Very interesting, your comments, but it just must be everything is a turmoil then, isn't it? Everything just seems to be upside down. Not only, your marriage and your life there, but everything else that you look at probably looks upside down too, doesn't it?
It does, Russ. And the thing about that is just because two people are not, meant to be together, or for whatever reason one leaves or the other doesn't really want that to happen, there's so much collateral damage that people do not understand. I mean, I have 9 siblings. They're all married. I have 32 nieces and nephews, my parents, his family, all of a sudden, and our children, obviously, and their friends and the people we've connected with over the years through school and activities, everything stops. Everything stops.
And after all those years of marriage to have it happen, that's a lot more dramatic than having a puppy love thing go upside down, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. You know what? And it's interesting because I have been counseling a lot of young people that maybe have been in relationships and then all of a sudden, and they're short term, maybe, a few months or a year, and I think to myself, oh my, it's tragic no matter what, and it's always a loss, and there is grieving no matter how long you've been with someone, but to think that no one really understands when you've been with somebody for so many years, and like I had mentioned before, the history and children together, and actually future events that will happen that you have to consider because, children get married, they have children themselves, or your grandparents, so there are many, many events to follow as a single person or a blended family. So those are the things you have to be prepared for.
And how you can't prepare ahead of time, can you? It's almost reactionary.
It is reactionary initially, and like I say, it's one of my messages that I'm finding with a lot of people that, and this is happening so often, as you pointed out, Jim, to me earlier, that divorce is not, this is not an isolated event. It's just, it's rampant, and what I'm discovering is that people generally want to be a couple, and so they fall into a real quick relationship too fast and find that, it really isn't the right fit for you down the road. And unfortunately, that's, part of the message. But the other message is everyone has to go through a grieving process. And any kind of loss, whether if it's a loss through death or divorce or any kind of a loss, the grieving process is essential, and you have to finish it in order for you to really go forward and be a healthy individual again and really want to have a relationship with someone.
What steps or how long a period were you, in a sense, lonely and not making any effort to socialize again or accept a date? What kind of timeline was there involved when you suddenly said, Ann, I've got to somehow find a possibility out there? From what I understand, you didn't particularly care for the bar scene or other ways. You went online, I believe, to start some online conversations.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I did. I challenged the notion of what it would be like to date in an online era, and the only reason is because, well, first let me backtrack. You asked how long it took me to get to that point. You know, everybody, it's variable, and everybody goes through a grieving process at different times and different stages, and it takes different lengths of time to get there. I think it took me 2 to 3 years. I really do, but I didn't recognize it at the time. Because there are stages. You have grief, you have denial, you have sadness and depression. I was probably depressed for 2 years. I lost 25 pounds. And, you know, unfortunately, everybody takes their own time, but unfortunately I was not ready to move forward, and I did too soon. Another message I want to put forth, I started this online dating when I was newly separated, so I hadn't finished my grieving process. And the very first person I met online, I had a relationship with. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is because, you know, my self-esteem was so low, and the first person that came along really offered a lot of potential stimulation, at least to boost that self-esteem to a level that I was looking for. And I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just thinking of survival, and I was thinking of maybe making myself feel good again. And I think a lot of people end up doing that, unfortunately, in a year. And actually, I dated this gentleman for about 2 years. I found out down the road that we were not meant for each other. There was no commonality. Our ages were the same. However, our intellectual backgrounds were different. Our interests were different. Our personality traits were different. And we have got to be a little more selective. So, you know, it took me about 2 or 3 years. And then during that period of time, it was 8 years of online dating. I discovered a lot about what it was like to be selective and discover the different personality types out there. And that's why I titled my book The Dance Card. And you gentlemen can probably relate to that, because back in my day, we would have dances at recreational halls. And we'd have a cardboard dance card with ballroom dances on it, like cha-cha or rumba or salsa or jitterbug or waltz. And accompanying each dance would be a gentleman or a woman you dance with, in hopes of maybe finding a love relationship. Well, those dance cards don't exist anymore, and they are being replaced by profiles from an online dating era or a dating site. And essentially, if you haven't done the online dating, a profile is really a synopsis of what that person is looking for in a relationship, and it's pretty much a sales pitch. They pour their hearts and souls out onto that virtual page in hopes of finding that perfect person. And what they write down may be stimulating, and they put a picture on their profile, and you know, it gives us a lot of options, really, this digital world. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating.
And I was away from the microphone and the speaker for a moment or a while. Maybe you and Jim have already talked, but how long has your book been on the coffee tables and on the bookshelves?
It came out in June.
What kind of response? You had response from people?
I have.
Saying, boy, I wish I'd had this book a long time ago? Or?
I do think so. I do think so, and I've been on this book tour, so, you know, and a lot of my radio and television interviews have been resonating with so many people. I never imagined in my wildest dreams that it would touch so many different, levels, really, of men and women, representing all economic and educational and social levels, because we all struggle on a daily basis, really, to comprehend what it's like to, you know, to find love again in midlife. And this is, I'm talking midlife. So, you know, I'm 64 now, and so, you know, we're still vital individuals, and we have all the needs and desires of anyone of any age.
Is this experience more dramatic to a male or female?
Well, that's a really good question. I can only speak for myself. However, I think that the men that I've talked to that have read my book, they take it differently because I'm very authentic in my stories, as you've read.
Mm-hmm.
I speak about, I have 10 dancers on my card, and I have given each one of them an alter ego name associated with a specific dance. For example, I have a Mr. Cha-Cha and a Mr. Rumba and a Mr. Salsa. And you know what? They're all specific to that particular dance within their personality because each expression of style is so significant to who they are. So, for example, my very first date, first gentleman that I met online, like I mentioned, was my Mr. Slow Dance. He was a perfect entree onto my dance floor because he was very conservative. He was very slow, and he took his time to get to know me. But we didn't really have a lot in common in terms of communication.
If I was on your dance card, you would say, I know what title I'd have. You're stepping on my feet.
It has to be a specific dance, but let me think about that one. Anyway, so, like I said, I was very authentic I have 10 vignettes, short stories relating to each particular dance. And so Mr. Rumba, by contrast, was a very sultry and sexy individual. He brought such an electrifying chemistry to our relationship. It was an undeniable attraction, even through cyberspace, and I can't explain that, but it just happened. So what I discovered after, dancing with lots of gentlemen, and I do suggest that people do that because I think we can't just settle for settling's sake just because we want to be a couple. We have to find someone that's going to fit within who we are in terms of our personality and our stage of life and such. So when I mention that, I'm going to talk about Mr. Walt's stage of life. Mr. Waltz was a very romantic partner. He was my last one in my book. He was very slow and full of emotion and drama and romance. And really, he held for me the hope of long-term commitment. However, he was 16 years younger than myself. He had a 6-year-old daughter, and I found out that I just could not relate to him because there was no familiarity in time and place. He didn't understand my generation. I didn't understand his. We didn't have the same familiarity in terms of events that we might have experienced or music. All of those things that come in line with, being able to communicate and feel comfortable with an individual. So that's, those are just a few to just talk about.
Well, and I keep thinking you begin the engagements as you just described. How long did it take to go beyond the emails and maybe the first phone call so you could hear the voice? And then when did you make a decision to say, well, let's meet, That's a great question because if you've never done the online dating, technology today is daunting. It's terribly different from what it was like, when we were first young and dating someone because it can be challenging and humiliating, but it's also technological, and the communication becomes very detached. First of all, there may be hordes and hordes of pictures and profiles that are sent my way or whomever you're looking for. And I was looking for a man between 50 and 60 because you can put your demographics down. Mm-hmm. And I wanted someone tall and intellectual and someone that was athletic. So there are specifics that you can, put in your profile or the parameters that we want. But most of the time they don't match up to the reality of what it ends up being. So if there's a particular gentleman that looks interesting, you start off with a slight communication via that site, either through a little chat on the site, and if the communication continues, then you can decide whether you want to change your exchange regular emails or cell phone numbers. And I would say that you can tell within a few
exchanges whether you're going to have a good communication or not, and then you can decide if you want to do that, and then the communication can continue off-site. So to decide whether you want to have a lunch date or a breakfast or something, that for me took a little while. I'm going to say maybe 6 or 7 communications by phone. And I think it's important to get off the site because, like I'm saying, with texting today, there is a lot of miscommunication and meaningless connection. And it allows for a lot of non-committed relationships. So when you do have the ability to speak on the phone, you have kind of a real-life situation there. And you can get their intonations. You can sense their voice, whether it's appealing or not. And that's very important. It really is, whether people believe it or not. For example, there was one gentleman that I started a conversation with, and he sounded great, or at least he sounded great on paper, and he sounded great, via the site. But once we had our first conversation on the phone, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't listen to this voice because he sounded like Kermit the Frog. Now that may sound shallow, but frankly, it's another aspect of your senses being very important in terms of making that connection, as well as the visual. Visual is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Well, you were 56 at the time.
Yes.
In the year 2006, by the way. And now we're 9 years later.
Correct.
And in your book called The Dance Card, you have mentioned the bolero, the rumba, the jitterbug. You have titled them in those categories. Did you get to a point where he proposed, or were you waiting eagerly for him to propose, or was there a possibility you got that near the next marriage?
No, there really wasn't. Like I said, the very first gentleman I met online, he wanted to get married. He was afraid to talk about it, and he had been divorced for 19 years, so he was ready.
Ooh.
I was not. Obviously, I was just separated. But that subject was never brought up. But I knew that that's what he wanted. I knew that, and I knew that wasn't going to happen on my end because I, number one, was not even divorced, and I wasn't ready for that. And I think you have to take your time. There were none of the others that I dated ever brought it up. Never wanted to talk about marriage. That wasn't in their dialogue. And what I discovered was because I don't really think a lot of men and women really want to get married in midlife. I really don't, at least the ones that I've encountered, because there are several reasons. One is that I found that they carried the wounds from their past forward, or their relationships, or past pains and sorrow from the divorce or whatever it was. They had a hard time moving forward, and they just idealized what they had in the past. And they thought, well, no one can match up to what I had, and I have children with this woman, and, this new woman isn't going to provide that for me, so why not just have, dalliances and relationships and not really have a commitment? That's what I discovered. So there was really no one that even talked about, possibly proposing. And Frank, and actually to add to that, the only one that is married today, and it's been 8 years later, is Mr. Slowdance, the very first gentleman that wanted to get married.
The one that was single for 19 years?
Yes, correct.
Mm-hmm. And he's the only one of all of the dance card partners that got married.
He's the only one, but let me add this to this. This is kind of a new part of my story. He contacted me about 6 months ago because he needed closure with me, this is 8 years later, because he was going to be getting married in May. And I agreed to meet with him, but to me and I asked him about his new fiancée and when they were getting married, and he just didn't sound very thrilled about the potential of getting married. And I thought to myself, why are you doing this and why are you meeting me? So, there again, is it logical to move forward with someone if you really are not connected to that person? I don't think he was connected to her, but he got married because he wanted to be a couple.
It's just all these happenstances are really a turmoil, aren't they? To try to make judgments and to get beyond them. you'll probably spend time as you're looking for another mate that they have to play in the shadow of the previous mate, good or bad, on
good
either
or bad.
side, and that must be an exhausting experience.
It can be. It depends upon your relationship with your former spouse, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I have to admit that I kept comparing. I did a lot of comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
And, because this is the pattern that I was used to. I was used to this particular gentleman. I was used to his style. And to remove yourself from that is very difficult. So I kept comparing what I had to a lot of my dates. And to me, that was not a good thing. It's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what we have to do is try to remove ourselves and redefine who we are and be an individual separate from that person that we were with for so many years. And it's hard to do. It's been 8 years now, and I think I've been able to do that. So I'm happy to move forward without any difficulty. But there is a time factor there. I really do believe people do that.
Let's get your background here, Ann. What profession were you in? I do know, but I want the audience to know.
Okay.
Yes, what profession were you in? What professions were the potential partners in? And whether they would, as you say, merge easily,
Yeah, that's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. I actually was a registered nurse for 30-plus years. I did a lot of clinical and hospital and public health nursing, as well as working in school districts. So after my retirement, I'm retired now. I love my work, actually. I also have a degree in art education. And I did teach art to begin with before I went into the nursing program. So I found myself after retirement doing a lot of creative works, and I do painting and drawing. And I have shown in New York. I've actually had a lot of my work sold in various cities. But I returned to my painting ventures, and I still do that, but I had to put all of that on the back burner now since I've been writing these books, and I have 3 in the works. My second one should be out soon, too. It's a continuation of this dance card, which is fascinating in itself. But that is my background. I come from a very athletic family, and I'm very athletic. I play a lot of tennis, and I do have a brother that played professional baseball and was quite the poster child for the Wheaties box at one point. But so I have a very varied background, and I have to say I've been very fortunate in my life in a lot of ways. I have 2 daughters who are grown and gone. But the gentleman that I dated, number one, the very first one, was an iron worker. He was a laborer and a very hard-working, wonderful man, sweet heart and soul, but not very well educated. Mm-hmm. The second one I went with was he was a contractor, and he built beautiful homes. I mean, lovely log homes up in northern Wisconsin, and has a lovely building company and continues to do so. Mr. Rumbaugh is an ornithologist. I mean, they come from all walks of life, which is wonderful. He studies birds. That's what he does. Navigates birds. And Mr. Waltz works for a printing company. And Mr. Cha-Cha, he was a gentleman that I never met, but he was, actually, I have a relationship with him just through online talking and actually emails. He was a physician, and he ended up with a stroke. And this is why we've never met. He has severe bouts of depression and is almost a recluse in his home, and so it's very difficult for him to get out and have relationships. Mm-hmm. But I continue to have an ongoing communication with him because I feel so connected to him, and he was definitely a very vibrant man in his life, and I feel so sorry for him. But now, since his retirement, all he does is build boats. He crafts lovely sailboats, and I have such admiration for him because I just feel that's such an art, and it's a lost art. And then there was a Mr. Salsa, who was an accomplished cellist, and he went around the world and performed. Mm. Yeah, fascinating. I mean, lovely stories. Can you imagine meeting all these gentlemen and listening to their stories? This has been fascinating for me, and I have enjoyed it thoroughly. And he now makes stringed instruments. He makes banjos and cellos and all kinds of stringed instruments in his studio, and that's what he does.
These relationships that you danced your way through, are many of those still on a friendly basis and a conversation kind of relationships?
They are, and that's another curiosity, Jim. Very curious because, like I said, there's only one that's married, and I certainly don't have any kind of conversation with him. You have to respect that, obviously. But the others are not, and, we continue communicating occasionally and just sporadically. And like I say, with this age of technology, everything is text-based. So occasionally I will hear from someone maybe 3 months down the road saying, well, how are you doing, Annie? Or what would you like to get together for lunch? And inevitably we never do get together. We just never. It's just a little hi, how are you? And the other curious thing about this, and it's so funny, I may not hear from anybody for months during the winter months, but spring comes and they come out of the woodwork.
What's the difference in a relationship entitled friends or a relationship entitled partner?
Oh, it's huge. Friends are just intermittent relationships, people that you might, have fondness for and you talk to occasionally and you really do care about them, but not on an intimate level. Partnership is definitely intimate related. And as you know, when two couples together, you can't deny the fact that, there is sex involved. And definitely when you reach that intimate level, it changes your whole perspective on being a partner. Once that happens, you really want that one-on-one, and everyone else is going to be put aside, as they should be. So at least that's who I am, and that, I'm definitely a monogamous person. I was in a monogamous, committed relationship for 30 years, and that's all I know. And my parents are both deceased now, but they were together for 76 years. So that's my normal. Now, I can't speak for other people. Others may not think that at all. They may, and I have found that there are a lot of men in midlife that just want, 1 or 2 time dalliances, and that's all that's what's meaningful to them, unfortunately, but that's not who I am.
And Reichardt, the author of the book, The Dance Card, will be back with our special guest after this message. It's Saturday, Russ.
It's Saturday, and the doors are open.
And the 5 banks are open for your convenience.
That's right, Jim.
And the ATMs, your friend there,
he
is available to you.
And he'll be there tonight, and he'll even be there tomorrow. So, he's a lifetime friend, Jim.
There's no question about it.
Yes.
But, Russ, your bank is certainly involved in the affairs of the community and the sponsorship of so many wonderful events.
We're very, very proud to be part of all those activities that go on in the community. And, the development of the bank and with John Scalise and other people, they reach out to the community. They're very proud to be part of the community, and they accept that responsibility gracefully.
Each day, make sure you meet a friend at the bank.
Absolutely.
Yep. And whatever needs are in place, they certainly will consider everything you could have in mind, whether it's a home, whether it's the fact you need a business loan.
Sure, any banking need that you might have.
Sure.
Come in and talk to the folks. And
the Jamestown Savings Bank, a branch of the Northwest Savings Bank, has been sponsoring this program since its very beginning about 20 years ago.
20 years, wow.
The Times of Your Life on WJTN Radio. We reach out again to Madison, Wisconsin. And our guest is Ann Reichardt, the author of the book, The Dance Card. Ann, if you don't mind, I want to read part of your book, okay?
Yes, please do.
And this is Chapter 8, and the way you started it said the following. I hesitated over looking for another dance partner. It was such a daunting task. But should it feel like, like a task at all? I asked myself, maybe finding love shouldn't be this much work. if the match is meant to be, then the moves should flow. What time, again, I go when you do meet for lunch or for breakfast, how soon at that occasion do you decide there's going to be an easy flow?
Oh, you know what? That's a great question, because people have asked me that many times, and for me, I know pretty much right away once I've met a person. You get the body language, you get vibes. There is either chemistry or there is not. And then once, you have, obviously, like I said before, we've had plenty of communication prior to, so you know a little bit about that person. You're not going to meet for a first-time date, actual reality date, without all that information in hand. So I have all that in the back, so I know that. But when you meet someone physically, oh my gosh, it changes everything dramatically. You either have an instant chemical connection, or you're drawn to that person, or you're not. And there have been many instances where I have not been drawn to that person, and generally we never have a second date. However, the ones that are listed on my dance card, there was a draw. So that's why I continued with, future dates with these gentlemen.
And should your book be a must-read for early relationships? And
Yes.
what about that saying, love at first sight?
I do think there is something to the love at first sight. There's biology behind that, and it has to do with, the chemicals within our body and the oxytocin that is increased within your brain when you do meet someone, that there is a chemical connection. There is biology behind that. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, when they say love at first sight, awesome. But there has to be more to it than that. Certainly there are several phases. You go through a passionate phase where you have all those chemicals that come to the fore, and everything else you're blinded by, and they say that truly, that they say that phase lasts within 12 to 18 months. Mm-hmm. But then the brain returns to a normal, non-dopamine phase. And then that passionate love fades, and then the companionate love enters. So, unfortunately, for many first-time dates, people dive headfirst into that passionate phase too fast, and then they get married, and they cohabitate, and then they discover that, that companionate stage follows closely behind. But it becomes too late because there's so many things that are disjointed, and they don't fit together. So you've got to get to know that person, and they say it takes about 2 years to be with someone to really understand if that individual is going to be right for you. Now, I can't say that for everyone. You can generally, there are a lot of instances where you can meet someone, initially and get to know them a little bit and then grow together. I mean, we're all evolving, but we have to evolve together and be able to, be able to communicate, and we have to be able to compromise, and there has to be that chemistry. So there are lots of factors that enter into something that's going to be successful in terms of a relationship.
It's a little bit like that song, isn't there? Word something about "I love you more today than I did yesterday," or something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
But there's another song that fits, Ann, and that song is "How Do You Keep the Music Playing?"
Wow.
How do you? How do you keep the music playing?
Yeah, that's a wonderful song.
It is, and I think it shouldn't be work, and I've seen it in my own parents where it wasn't work, it was just there, and there was so much, I think you both sacrifice in some instances. You have to in order to make it work. It's not going to be, nothing is perfection, but if you love and respect that other person so much, giving isn't giving at all. I mean, it's not work. That's my perspective on that. But, I don't know. The first question you asked me, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Is it a must-read?
Oh, it is a must-read. And what I was going to say is that what I found is it really isn't just for middle-aged people. I have had a lot of 20-year-olds come up to me and they say, wow, I'm so glad that I got your perspective on, what you went through, and this could happen to me. So I better be a little more selective. And thank you so much. And I hate to say this, but even my own daughter, who who was supposed to be getting married in October, she had her second thoughts about the person that she was going to be getting married, and it had everything to do with the fact that they were a mismatch, and she discovered that.
Wow.
The other question, Ann Reichardt, is: weren't there in your world of 56 years, in your marriage, in your job, in your church or organizations you belong to, weren't there potential partners there that you knew on a personal basis? And didn't you get a dating offer from some gentleman that was widowed or was considering the possibility?
Never. Not once. No, not at all. And I do talk about that because, and frankly, in my situation, being in Madison, Wisconsin, my former husband was fairly well known, and I, when a couple splits up, we were, you're kind of separated. So you were put in one category, he's put in the other category, and alliances change. So all of our joint friends, most of them wanted to align with him. So I became the person that you cannot, there was absolutely no way that someone would set me up with a friend. It was never happened. And I even in church or other settings, there was just never a potential. And it was very shocking to me. And I tried all the, things that people suggested. Well, take your dog to the dog park. Met a lot of wonderful people. But, how do you present yourself? It's like, oh, I'm a single person. Do you want to go out on a date? It doesn't work that way. So, with online dating, it was challenging and humiliating and frightening at first, and it was really an affront to my self-esteem, but it also was enlightening and exciting and really the only way to meet someone. It's a $2.4 billion industry, so can you imagine the numbers of the endless supply of people who are single out there?
I've witnessed from some distance the online dating. It was successful and just outstanding, wonderful relationships.
Yeah, and I really believe that is the only way that we can, I hate to say it this way, but sort of pick and choose, and we have the ability in knowing that these other people are out there looking for love as well. Mm-hmm. Whereas you don't see that if you go to church, and you don't see that if you, enter a bar, or not that I would do that, but even in the grocery store, like they say, meet your love at, in the produce department. Those days are gone, and so I really believe the online dating scene is probably the only potential way to meet people.
Well, why do you say they're gone? Those
well, I haven't experienced that, and like I said, if you go, let's say we go to a movie or go to church, how do you let people know and say, hey, I'm interested, you want to go on a date? That's not something I would go up to a person, sitting with me in the pew and say, so people are fearful of making that first step. Mm-hmm. And that first step is already taken once you've entered into an online dating site.
Let me ask this question, Ann. After you do meet a person and you're going to have a second date, maybe a third, do you introduce them to your family? Do you talk about your children, your parents, and so that he gets an idea of what background you had and what has shaped your life and your philosophy of life?
Well, definitely. And my whole quest was to always be interested in my partner, the person that I was dating, because I was very fascinated in the various lives of these gentlemen, and I would, I went into every date asking questions about their families, and many of them would reciprocate. However, and that's important, yes, I spoke about my kids, I spoke about my former life, and most of those people were divorced. So they had a lot to talk about in terms of how many years they'd been divorced and what their marriage was like. And so that seemed to dominate the conversation. Unfortunately, that we have to get past that in order to focus on us as individuals, beyond what our life was prior to. However, that, our lives do shape who we are today, for sure. And that's a challenge. That is a challenge to do that. But a lot of the gentlemen that I spoke to would dwell on their past, and unfortunately, like I said, they carry those pains from their past forward, and they had to get beyond that. Obviously, they hadn't finished their grieving process, but I would never, ever have them come to my home unless I knew that this was someone that I was interested in, and I would introduce to my family.
Mm-hmm. Let me, are you in a relationship today?
I am not.
Mm-hmm. And you're 64 years old?
I am.
So what have you done? How do you project your future at this point?
You know, I'm open to anything, Jim. I am, and I always have been, except maybe when I first started this dating, because I was muddling through it. It's very complicated. There are a lot of options, and the data that we have to filter through is unbelievable, and our checklists are huge in what is important in finding that perfect mate, and that's what I've discovered over the 8 years. You have to find that perfect mate. Not that there's perfection, but you don't want to just pick and choose just anyone or the first person that comes along. So you have to go in with realistic expectations about finding a long-term partner. Don't set yourself up for disappointment. And you have to recognize, like I keep expounding on, the importance of being selective in who you choose. Don't settle for the sake of being a couple. One's personality and interests and looks and education, religious and economic backgrounds are all very important factors in choosing that person. And another thing is, do they have children? Can they identify with you having gone through raising kids? Because a lot of men, two of them in particular, never had children, so they can't identify with what the challenges of having children that keep going forward. As our children marry and have grandchildren. So that was interesting also too. Were they divorced? Mm-hmm. Were they widowed? Mm-hmm. People that were widowed were so deeply grieving over the loss of someone they loved, totally different from a divorce. Mm-hmm. They would probably compare to as well for their next person, but they wanted to find love because they knew the positive points and aspects of being in love with someone. And where a person lives, that's another factor. Many of my dates lived maybe outside of Madison, and it was a challenge in terms of having a continual connection with that person, because when you're in a long-distance relationship, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work unless you're willing to pick up and move and live in the same state.
And as you were putting together your dance card, did you find yourself making comparisons from the experience that did not continue for you? I don't want a left-hander because he was left-handed. I don't want him because anybody's driving a red car I don't like because he drove a red car, or he had saddle shoes. I don't want anybody to ever wear saddle shoes. Do you ever find that of putting that up as a no-no list?
Oh no, those are really shallow, insignificant things.
Wonderful.
Oh, definitely. No. You have to look at the values.
What are some of the serious hurdles that you evaluated?
For me, it was education and communication.
Mm-hmm.
It really was important for me because I have several degrees, and I didn't want someone that couldn't communicate with me on those various levels, because that to me is stimulating. And,
mm-hmm.
If you have no commonality there, it just wouldn't go anywhere. The other thing was athleticism. I'm very sports-minded, and I like the idea of being involved in sports and being athletic. And so to have someone to participate in sports with me, either as a participant or someone who's going to be an observer, that was important. That may sound silly, but it's important mm-hmm. for me. And other people may say, well, I'm a bookworm. I'd rather just spend time in a library. I wouldn't want to do that. But I also like the cultural aspect of life and theater and performing, which I've done also. And if someone doesn't really, and men don't really like that, I understand that. No problem. We have to compromise. We do have to compromise.
A satellite question. Baseball career for your brother.
Yes.
You said he played professional baseball.
He did.
And can you share where and the success and At what level and what positions? And
Great success, actually. His name was Rick Reichardt. He signed with the California Angels in 1963. He was one of the very first bonus babies ever to sign for Major League Baseball. And the California Angels at that time was a Gene Autry enterprise.
Oh, yes.
So Rick was with that organization for a number of years, and then was traded and played for the Kansas City Royals and Chicago White Sox, and he was with Ted Williams and Washington Senators.
wow.
He had about a 10, 12-year career and was very, very successful. I mean, he was a bonus baby for sure.
What is he doing today, Ann?
Rick is actually retired. He's 72 now, and he lives in Gainesville, Florida, and he's a CFP and a CLU, and just works, periodically. But he has 4 children and quite a few grandchildren. So just enjoying his retirement years.
Yeah, beautiful.
At this point, is this the obvious question, Ann? When you look back at your dance partners,
yes,
Mr. Slow Dance, Mr. Bolero, Mr. Jitterbug, Mr. Waltz, and all of those partners, is there a moment that you thought, maybe I should have married Mr. So-and-so?
The only one that I felt that I might have a connection with, which I pointed out earlier, was Mr. Waltz. But he was the one that was much too young for me, and our stage of life was totally off. I was retired, and he had another 15, 20 years to work, and I was ready to travel and enjoy the fruits of my labor, so to speak. And I really didn't want to have to raise a young daughter again. I mean, his daughter was probably the age of a potential granddaughter that I could have. So, I felt I had to be a little selfish at this point. I really did. And he just didn't, we got along beautifully, and he was the only guy that lived in Madison, the only person that lived in town. So that tells you something. I think that's why our connection was so continuous.
It seems, as I sit here and look and listen to you and Jim, you probably don't know, but for years and years and years, very, very successfully and very well attended, Jim used to MC record hops. So how about the dance partners at the record hops, Jim? I was sitting thinking about that for the dance cards.
Maybe Ann Reichardt did the twist with Chubby Checker. And
Oh, you know what? My sister did the twist with Chubby Checker. She actually did. She met him up on stage and did the twist.
That is cute.
Well, you probably did the locomotion with Little Eva.
Oh, did that too. Oh my gosh, we can all identify with those.
Well, this was during the Dick Clark Bandstand era.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. A wonderful time with the teenagers of our community, and it was a real adventure for 10 years to be doing hops on the weekend,
It was fun. It was a fun time.
It really was. Well, Ann Reichardt, you said another book is in the making. You've got a moment here to give it a plug.
Oh, it's called The New Dance Card, Looking for Love Online. My first one is The Dance Card, Looking for Love After Divorce. So now I'm going forward. I'm not thinking about the divorce anymore. I'm looking for a potential partner. And what I have done is I revisit all the old dancers that I have on my first dance card, and there are 10 of them. Where are they now? And like I'm talking to you now, I'm telling you, where are they now? But that in itself is a story, or is a book in itself. But then I open up a whole new dance card with 10 new dancers.
I'm trying to think of 10 new dances.
Oh, there are a lot of dances out there.
Certainly there are. Ann Reichardt, we certainly thank you for the pleasure of giving us your story.